In the Perspectrum podcast, we discuss controversial topics. Outside of this context, Michael and I are both working professionals. While doing this show, we are not acting as agents or representatives of our respective institutions, and none of the views that we express reflect the outlooks of our employers. So don't come to my office and throw toilet paper at me.
And I don't have an office, but don't come to my cube. Well, hello and fuck it. Pretty unconventional episode today. I think we're gonna be ranting and raving because Nathan and I are in desperate need of it.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I will say right from the beginning, I'm usually one of the calm ones. I don't know how mad Nathan is gonna be. I'm gonna be really mad.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm honestly, when I first heard the results, like I was actually I was very despondent.
Yeah. Actually, I
Like-
love that idea. Let's go through our experience of hearing the results the day and the couple of days afterwards. I would love to hear that trajectory from you.
Yeah, well, so funny thing is, we were actually planning on recording an episode where it was going to be us and a few friends kind of reacting
Yeah.
to the to the results as they're coming in, and then Michael had a family emergency and he wasn't able to join us, and I still ended up having several friends join us,
Okay.
join on Zoom.
I
But
was
at that
curious
point,
about that, yeah.
at that point, it was already looking bad, and I wasn't feeling the energy to record it, so I ended up just kind of sitting on Zoom with Kyle, with Taylor for a little bit, with Kayla for a while, watching the results coming in, and I was kind of sharing my screen and kind of breaking down some of the results for them
Sure.
and
A
showing
bit of
them
a
the
live
various
show, yeah,
areas.
that's cool.
I will say, the moment that I realized that this was probably not going to go our way was Florida. Because for once, Florida actually got the results in very quickly. Usually we're waiting forever for Florida to get their shit together, but for once they actually were pretty much the first state to get their results in.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that I realized Trump had overperformed the polls in Florida by double.
Yeah.
Like, he was leading in Florida by 7 points in the polls, and then he won by 13, 14 points.
Yeah.
I realized, fuck, this is not going to go well. And I was trying to stay somewhat hopeful about the blue wall states, but fucking hell.
Yeah, totally.
We need to stop calling them that. We need to stop
Honestly,
calling them the blue wall states.
What a misnomer. Okay, so that was the night of, and then how?
That was the night of, and then eventually I had to turn it off. I went to bed, but I did not sleep. I did not sleep at all. My wife eventually got up, and I got a text from her that said, "You should come talk to me before you see the results." This was at about 6, and I was already awake, so I was like, "Fuck, it's over."
Yeah.
And so I walked into the living room and I said, "He fucking won, didn't he?" And she said, "Yeah." And I didn't go back to sleep. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I was despondent. I mean, I seriously, for a while I was feeling like I don't even know if I can do this pod anymore. I don't know if I can do my job anymore, because my job is to teach people about advocacy and public speaking. And if I don't believe that advocacy can actually do something, then what am I actually doing? And then I called my parents, and I started looking up communication professor jobs in Scotland.
Yeah, but they'll never understand your accent.
Well, maybe the American accent is sexy over there.
Yeah,
you know?
There you go. Yeah.
And then eventually I started to come around to just be pissed and pumped. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, there you go.
And I want to talk. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But what was your reaction, Michael? How?
Yeah, so I had a very different night. We had as you mentioned, a bit of a family emergency. Everything turned out to be fine. Everything was okay. But I was in like the ER and urgent care for like most of the evening as results were starting to come in. Kind of similar. I was like, wow, that Florida really went. I couldn't quite remember like what Florida was polling because I haven't been paying attention because I knew it was going to go to Trump. And I was like, that seems extreme. And then, and then I was like looking at Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and I was like, this seems wrong. And like, there's no real reason to think that like we're going to have these big waves of significantly partisan votes. And I was like, well, there's still technically, mathematically, as I was going to bed, I was like, there's still mathematically enough votes left that she could get ahead in enough states. So that's what I went to bed with, thinking truly she's going to pull it out. There's going to be something. And then I woke up in the morning and I didn't look at my phone because I was like, if I look at my phone right now, I'm going to be a zombie for the rest of the day. And, went about my business, all that stuff. Breeze asleep. I typically get up because I work pretty early hours. I wake up, a couple hours usually before Bree. But I go back in the room after a shower to like get dressed, and Bree just like gives me she's like awake and looking at her phone, and she gives me a look, and I'm just like,
yeah.
I was like, don't tell me that. Don't like, and yeah. And then of course I looked at the actual results, was in denial for a little bit. And then similarly to you, I was totally like despondent throughout the day. I was miserable, such a hard time concentrating. I was a total mess, which I was surprised by. Cause like I was not expecting, I've never really felt politics super personally, if that makes sense. Like I remember in 2016, I was frustrated and disappointed, but I don't know, it lasted for a couple of hours and then it was like, okay, whatever. Like we'll go do stuff. But I've never really felt it like emotionally like that. But it really hit me super hard on the day. I was a mess the whole day. And then over the following days, I've just gotten very, very angry.
Yeah.
And like, I know it sounds like you've gotten angry as well. I have gotten angry, and also I am not optimistic at all. I feel like no optimism. You feel like jazzed and ready to go, and that's one thing, and I think that's great. I don't know that I have any reason not to feel optimism, except like the more I learned about how badly he won, the more it was like, oh, this project has failed. It's one thing if it was like, oh, he lost the popular vote again and eked out an electoral college win, like, which is, felt like a likely scenario. But like the fact that he overperformed so much, the fact that every fucking state except for Washington and California fucking moved to the right. The fact that in the battlegrounds where she obviously like technically lost, her margins, relatively speaking, compared to like 2020 were better like than all of the rest of the fucking country. I just have settled in just this absolutely profound disappointment and anger.
I will say, like, right off the bat, I will end, I'll end this pod with a message of hope. Because I do have a message of hope, but before we get to that, we got some fucking things to talk about. We got some fucking things to process.
Dude, the takes that I have been seeing.
Fucking go. Let's fucking go. Okay.
Right.
First off, let me just say shit about the Harris campaign. All right. Let me just say shit about the fucking Harris campaign. The reason why people were so pumped, the reason why people were so jazzed about her to begin with is that she was not Biden.
Yeah.
All right. That she was not Biden. And there were a lot of people that thought that she might be different in a lot of ways. There were a lot of people that thought, hey, maybe she'll be better on Gaza. And the thing is, there is absolutely no fucking reason why a Democrat should struggle with the youth vote against Donald Trump. There is no reason whatsoever that you should be struggling with that. And yet, you were a part of administration that is carrying out a fucking genocide overseas, and You couldn't break from them on that. You couldn't say, hey, yes, I support an arms embargo. This is a difference between me and Biden. You couldn't do that. Biden basically gave you permission to be different from him. All right. You couldn't make that break. You had to just stand there and say, like, no, we will never abandon Israel no matter what. You had to say that. You couldn't even say, like, I am leaving the option on the table in response to what they're doing. There were so many Arab Americans. Like, there were so many Arab Americans that we were hearing from that were basically saying, I hate Trump. I despise Trump. I want to vote for Harris, but I just can't because I cannot stand for supporting genocide. I cannot stand for this. Imagine throwing away your chance at being the most powerful person on the face of the fucking planet because you had to take a principled stance in supporting a genocide.
Yeah.
And in response, you have stuck us with Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fucking, yeah. Yeah. And like the fact that all of the excitement about her early campaign and like all of the excitement about like, oh, like she might actually have some like economically populist policies. Like she might be able to actually make a difference on this. And then like, I don't know, it just felt like she was running away from all of her policies that might actually have helped people. Like there were lots of her economic policies would have helped people, but the ones that like felt tangible, the ones that felt real, it seems like she ran away from. Like she like, and all Trump had to do was be like, tariffs will lower your cost. And it's like, yeah, that's a fucking lie. It's because you don't understand what tariffs are, dude. But also like, it was simple and it didn't matter. Like obviously Harris should be accurate. Like it didn't matter if it was true or not, but like it was simple and people believed it. And Harris had a very complex economic message, which is like, okay, you can do that, but you have to be able to back it up with something. You have to tie it together with some thesis and theme that allows people to understand it simply. The fact that like I was talking to people leading up to the election and they literally didn't know who would be better for their pocketbook. They literally didn't know who would cost them more or less money. They didn't know who would like help with job growth. Like, and yet if you actually look at their policies, every single policy area, like Harris is better than Trump, and yet people were not aware of that. People, or they weren't aware of that, or they didn't believe it. And so, like to your point, like I will say, like I am a little bit like over being frustrated with the Harris campaign, honestly. But we can talk about that more. But
I'm not.
There will be so many episodes about like what do we do from here and like the future and how do Democrats like do a better job and all this stuff. But like I totally agree. I think like she had a real shot. She did an amazing thing in 100 days. She did claw back a tremendous margin relative to Biden on a ton of issues. And she did, and that is very, very impressive. But there are also just like clear areas where it's like she was not reading the temperature of the country and the room appropriately.
Yeah. People were not looking at, like, they were not looking for do you have the support of the old Republicans? You know, like Dick Cheney, who left office with like, what, a 13% approval rating?
If they wanted a Republican, they would vote for Trump because plenty of people think he's just a Republican.
Exactly. So why the fuck you are not going to get Republicans on your side? All right. I'm not saying that you can't, like, you know, when someone brings it up, you can't be like, well, I do have some Republicans endorsing me. Like, fine, but fucking bring that up. Maybe don't advertise Dick Cheney.
Sure. And it's helpful to be like, oh, look at all the Republicans in his cabinet that think he's dangerous and think he's bad. But that's a very different case than like,
that's fine.
And then like, oh, old world Republicans that also wanted to fucking screw you over, like me. That's a totally different case.
Like the thing is, the thing that the Democratic Party needs to understand is that your base will not always show up for you. All right? Your base of support will not always show up for you unless they believe in you. and they didn't believe in her. You thought that they were already set, so you were trying to go to the right to get people from Trump. But here's the thing: the way you did that is by appealing, is by touting the endorsement of war hawks, and by basically saying, "Hey, Trump is right about everything on immigration. The only difference is that I am slightly." I'm a little bit less harsh on immigration, even though he is right about everything to do with immigration. So vote for me. Of course, like if people think, like, think about that logically. If people think like, okay, so you agree that on the exact that immigration is a problem. You agree with that. And your solution is to do this, and his solution is to do that, but more. Yeah. Of course they're going to fucking go for him.
Yeah, the fact that...
Just make the affirmative case for immigration, you goddamn dumb, stupid idiot.
Yeah, the fact that there were times when there were times in policies when she was not distinguishable from Biden, and other times in policies where she was barely distinguishable from Trump. And I think that's honestly... As excited as I was about Harris when she kind of first entered the race as like a potential, first of all, a reprieve from Biden and a potential, a chance, a potential option. She came in with it with the same fundamental liability that she has had since at least her run in the Democratic primary for 2020, is that she is this deeply political animal.
Yeah.
Is that
she doesn't believe in anything.
She's going to she's going to follow whatever the particular direction is on a particular policy. And so it feels like even though sometimes she herself, her character feels authentic, it doesn't feel like she has a unified belief, a theory of the case. Like she'll say she's going to fight for you, but it's like somewhat difficult to tell how she's going to fight for you differently, or how she's going to really beat you, like really fight for you.
Yeah.
And so it's impossible for her to make the strong case. It's impossible for her to see why people feel passionately, because she, I guess, doesn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like,
she's not an activist, and that's the thing. That's what we needed all along. And I just like to point. I actually listened to our episode from all the way back in 2020, where it was like one last warning about Joe Biden, where basically what we said was things are going to get probably a little bit better, but they're not going to get better enough. They're going to get better so slowly that no one's going to realize that they've gotten better. No one's going to think that they've gotten better, because the thing is, the distance between where we were at that point, and that was right in the midst of COVID. The distance between where we were and where we needed to be was so fucking vast that incremental change was just not going to cut it. And we fucking warned people.
Yep.
We fucking warned people, if you go with this guy, it is going to put us in the exact same situation we were in before we had Trump, which led to Trump.
Yeah.
We fucking warned
That's
people.
crazy. I should go back and listen, because that sounds like a fucking premonition.
We called it. And look, I will say, I definitely did underestimate Trump this time around. Like, my prediction was that Harris would win, but I would just like to point out, I was not confident in that prediction. I never said that I was. I told all of you that on election day, I would not be surprised whatsoever if Harris swept all the swing states, and I would not be surprised at all if Trump did that. And it looks like that's exactly what he's going to do. They still haven't called Nevada or Arizona yet, but it's looking like it's going to go to him too. So he will have swept all of the swing states. And I told you all not to be surprised if that happened.
Yeah.
All right. We said that. And way back in 2020, we said that this could fucking happen. All right. We said that you put some fucking incrementalist that's just going to protect the status quo. Things are not going to get better fast enough. And the problem is, things did get better. Mm-hmm. Gas prices did go down. And unemployment, jobs were created. There were several things that did get better, but they got better so slowly.
Yeah.
And they're not even at the point that things were before the pandemic at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, things aren't where they were at that point. So of course people are going to think, like, this administration is not done enough.
Yeah.
All right. And if you come out there and say, well, I'm just going to be exactly like Biden, I don't think that he could have done anything differently, people are going to hear that and be like, oh, okay. So basically the stuff that we already know hasn't done enough, she's just going to keep doing that. Well, screw that.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote for Trump.
Could you imagine having an approval rate near 50 and you're like, I'm actually no different from the guy that has an approval rate at 30?
Yeah.
What the? Yeah, seriously.
Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And the thing is, you chose Tim Walz and you didn't use him.
Yeah.
You didn't use him. You should have had him on every single channel, every single day doing interviews.
Mhm.
All right. Why it felt like you spent the entire, both you and Walz spent the entire campaign in the basement. And you know what? Yes, that worked for Biden in 2020 because he wasn't the incumbent.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
All he had to do was sit back and watch Trump continue to fuck things up. And that worked for him. But you couldn't do that this time around because you're the incumbent.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, I definitely fell into this trap. I imagine they did as well, which is believing that holding on to some semblance of hope that, yeah, sure, Trump has a lot of support, but that's among his base. And the rest of us learned our lesson. That's honestly how I felt. I was like, yeah, but we know, the rest of us saw Trump. We know, how awful and crazy and horrible he was. And so I was kind of going into it basically being like, yeah, he could still win, but certainly he's not going to increase his margins a bunch because people know who this guy is and they are informed about how bad he is. And all of his policies are terrible. And he's bad at selling those, even though they're terrible.
Yeah.
So honestly, I definitely fell into the trap of being this guy is a known and unwanted quantity.
But the problem is, things were the economy at large was better during the time that Trump was president. Not because of anything he did. In fact, he did everything he could to fuck it up, but because of the recovery that we had under the Obama administration. Then COVID-19 hit, and a lot of the bad aspects of the economy under him at the end of his presidency and for Joe Biden in the beginning and going into his presidency were us needing to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
All right. But the fact of the matter is, people don't have great memories.
Totally.
They remember the economy was better under Trump. Right now, the economy is worse and Biden is president.
Yeah.
Ergo, we vote for Trump. We make the economy better. And the problem is the media and Kamala Harris focused so much on talking about how terrible Trump was as a human being, they didn't spend enough time breaking down how stupid his policies were.
Yeah.
All right. At the debate, basically all she said was, "Oh yeah, his tax on his tariffs are
raise costs,
are a sales tax and it's going to raise costs." You needed to go into that more. You needed to be going to every single interview.
Yeah.
Bringing that up. I watched the Fox News interview. I'm pretty sure she didn't bring up the tariffs in the Fox News interview. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure she didn't bring it up. And even if she did, the fact that I can't remember it means that she did not make it an emphasis.
Yeah,
That
totally.
was not something she emphasized.
Which puts her squarely in the seat of an incumbent. She's not on the offensive going after this guy, not just for his terrible character, which is, again, a known quantity, but for what he's going to do that is bad and why it will be worse. Like an argument that I've been making that I think is very effective is being yes, Trump says he's not into Project 2025, which got a lot of people's attention, right? People actually cared about Project 2025. It was the policy document that was dragging Trump down. But then he effectively distanced himself from it. Tie him back to it. You know how you can do that? That he implemented a third or 2/3 of the policies, or attempted to, and that the personnel policy, which would allow him to politicize 20,000 more positions in the federal government, making them less effective, making your government less effective for you, is an executive order that he actually already passed. You can be like, look at this guy. He actually already did multiple of the things that are going to make it even worse that Biden just undid. He just did it too late in his presidency for it to be horrible, but he's going to do it right away this time. And the other thing is, like, for people that hate politics, that are tired of politics, if you can tell them that, yeah, this guy's going to take all of the functioning parts of our government and make them into the same political mess that you already hate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Also, like, why didn't you make, like, one of the messages that I kept saying was, so Donald Trump, he gets elected, he is going to replace Alito and Thomas.
yeah.
All right. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the day he's inaugurated, one of them announces their retirement, or
Sure.
like at least in the first year, like one of them will retire. That's what's going to happen, and that means that the campaign finance system that we currently hate, that is as a result of Citizens United, that means that is going to be solidified. That means that five of the justices will have been appointed by Donald Trump, which means that shit is not going away in our lifetime. You needed to hit that. Like, why are you not talking about campaign finance reform? Democrats and Republicans care about that. What you do is you know, one of the things that people liked about Bernie, even Republicans liked about Bernie, he said, litmus test for Supreme Court justices for me. Are you going to overturn Citizens United? No? Then I'm not interested in you.
Yeah.
All right? Why didn't you make that part of your message? All right? Why? You could very easily emphasize that.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
And-
the only reason I can
yeah.
think of is the fact that you don't care about that's something that you want to preserve, which is even worse.
Yeah. I mean, or she just thinks that, to your point earlier, she had the base in the bag. They were all going to turn out, and that all she had to do was chase the middle. But to your point, like, even just sprinkling some of those crumbs throughout, it didn't have to be her central message, but giving the progressives, like the people that are paying attention, something to go
That's not even a
after.
progressive position.
Yeah, that's just a
Everybody
basic
hates Citizens
position.
United.
Yeah.
Like, literally, you pull that shit, majority Republicans, like show me the rando, like,
Yeah.
normie guy who's like, you know what? Gee, golly, gosh darn it. I love the fact that politicians are able to be bribed.
Seriously.
Like, show me that person.
Yeah, totally.
All right?
Yeah. And to your, a little bit of data to support your point, just one tiny fact is, like, not as many people turned out this election. People
Yeah.
were less motivated. Like, Trump lost 2 million votes relative to his 2020 win, approximately. Like, we're still counting votes, but that's the current estimate. And Harris lost 10 million relative to Biden's win.
Yeah.
Like,
It was less of a turnout. Like, that's the thing. You didn't mobilize your base the way that you should have. People were not excited to. And the thing is, there are a lot of people that probably stayed home because they were pissed off at that Gaza policy.
yeah.
Or they were pissed off at that immigration policy, or they were pissed off because you were not effectively distancing yourself from Biden, and you weren't effectively distancing yourself from Trump.
Yeah. I mean, and there will be so much debate in the coming weeks and months and years over, like, how this went and what we can do about it. And ultimately, yes, it was the job of the Democrats and the Harris campaign to inspire people to vote for them, to bring people to the table, and to do the convincing, to do an effective job getting people to come to their side. At the same time, though, as frustrated as I am with all of that and every strategic mistake that they have made, I have been so angry with voters.
Yeah.
And, like, you might disagree.
Yeah.
You feel free to distance yourself from these remarks, Nathan. No need for you to tie your name to them. But I am so angry at voters. Like, every person who stayed home, every voter who voted for Trump, every voter who went third party, probably with the exception of our American voters that had family that were fucking killed because of the genocide.
Yeah.
Every one of them, I blame them. I blame them directly. And I want them to feel incredible shame over the next 4 years. Especially, like, undecided voters who went third party, or Democrats, like people that were close, Democrats who stayed home, people that were close to making the right decision who didn't. I want them to look in the face of the shit that happens over the next 4 years, and I want them to feel personally connected to every single thing that the Trump administration does, because I am so angry with them over the choice that they made. Like, every bad it has already started, right? Already, companies are planning to start increasing prices in order to pay for Trump's tariffs. And sure, we can definitely talk about like whether companies should be raising prices and all that stuff. We can talk about the corporate interests in this country and all of the corruption and all that stuff. But all that shit was priced in, and we knew what was going to happen from Trump's policies. We knew that it would make it more expensive for low-income people to fucking feed their fucking babies. Right? We knew this. And if you didn't know it, you were stupid. Like, it is already fucking starting, and it will happen every single fucking day for the next 4 fucking years. Like, and I think like we've talked about, yes, like Kamala Harris's campaign made a bunch of mistakes. The Democratic Party in Joe Biden and then subsequently Kamala Harris gave us establishment candidates that were uninspiring. But I am so frustrated hand-holding the adults, the grown fucking adults that can't get off their fucking couches to go stop a fucking fascist, racist bigot who is going to destroy their personal lives. Like, I'm so over trying to be inspiring to these fucks that can't read a fucking article or learn a fucking thing that will inform their fucking vote that maybe they shouldn't vote for this fucking guy. Like, like, I get it that people want to feel identified with the candidate that they vote for. But a presidential election is a single fucking choice. One fucking choice. And when the risks are this high, it's not about advocacy, and it's not about activism, and it's not about sending a fucking message. By the time you're standing in the fucking ballot box, you've got one fucking choice. And if you care so much that you'll sabotage the people in this country that can't afford to fucking eat today and will starve tomorrow, if you care so much about sending that message, maybe you should have thought about that in the 4 fucking years since like we took office, and maybe you should think about that over the next 4 fucking years and be inspired to do something aside from send a fucking message with your fucking inconsequential fucking vote. Like, no one is getting that message. And it is too late now to do anything about it. And like, in the near term, my family, if I'm lucky, my family will probably be fine. The people I love will probably be okay. If Trump doesn't overthrow the government, right, which is a chance, but maybe not a high one, I will probably be okay. I'll be a little bit poor. I'll be stressed out as fuck. Maybe I'll lose my job. Maybe the people in my family will lose their jobs. But we probably won't starve, and we'll probably be okay. But it's not about me, right? It's not about all the people that are super fucking lucky. It's about the millions of people who aren't as lucky, the thousands of people who will slip below the poverty line, the thousands of people who will be malnourished and unable to better their lives, the thousands of children that will go to school hungry, be unable to concentrate and unable to study, unable to learn, and therefore unable to better their lives in the future. This will cripple a fucking generation. It is about thousands of dead Ukrainians and thousands of dead Palestinians and Israelis who will die unnecessarily because this guy will be irresponsibly in office. And not to mention the impossibility at this point of avoiding a climate disaster. Like, these are the stakes. As soon as Trump won, I said, people are going to die. People will suffer and they will die, and it is now just a question of how many. And so I get it if you're not inspired, and I get it if you don't identify with Harris, and I get it if you're frustrated and you want to change the system, but do it on your own fucking time. Don't the fucking gall to be willing to accept the suffering of and deaths of thousands of people because you didn't quite feel excited about this presidential candidate. I'm so angry at the voters. I can't get past it. And I've like put this on my Facebook, and people have been responding like with all kinds of mitigants, like, oh, I just didn't feel it, and I've been like, I have no patience for that.
I will say, again, before I say anything, I do just want to reiterate something that Michael said, which is the exception for me is the Arab American voters, who, could not be complicit in genocide. Like I think that it's hard to go to these Arab American communities and to say, listen, Biden might be terrible, but Trump's going to be way worse. And it's like, okay, but these people lost their family. Like, how can you get worse? Like, I want to be clear about that. And normally I try to avoid voter shaming
because it's not effective.
Because it's
not because it's not
but
fucking right.
not because it's not, because it's not effective, not because it's not right. But here's the thing, like, and yeah, Harris is not entitled to anybody's vote. But the fact of the matter is, there are so many people whose lives are going to be impacted by this. Like, there are so many people who I love whose lives are going to be impacted by this. All right. Look, as a teacher, I work with a very diverse amount of students. I work with multiple queer students, multiple immigrant students. My university is in a refugee resettlement area. All right. Legal immigrants, which the Trump administration during the Trump campaign was complaining about legal immigrants. All right. Those Haitian migrants, those were legal immigrants. All right. So don't give me this bullshit about, oh, he's just against the illegal immigrants. That's what he's against. He's not against. No, that's not fucking true. He wants to make it harder for the legal process to also happen. All right. So I have worked with multiple different types of students that will be deeply impacted by this. I have so many friends, queer friends, trans friends, that are going to be affected by this. All right? The very real possibility of trans healthcare being being banned on a federal level or being restricted at a federal level, that is real. And there are people that I love that I don't want to lose. I'm afraid that there are people that I love that are going to take their own life because they are going to be living in a nation for the next 4 years that will not prioritize their healthcare or their well-being. And I'm not saying that every single person that voted for Trump is okay with that, but it wasn't a deal breaker. It wasn't a deal breaker for you. And you know what else? Trump chose Vance as his running mate. Vance voted against protecting IVF. The excuse that the Republicans gave was, oh, well, there's no threat. This is just a way the Democrats are trying to make us look like the bad guys. So we're going to make ourselves look like the bad guys by voting against it. Fucking brilliant. No, you are the bad guys. And look, I'm not saying that I think that they're going to vote to ban IVF. But it is a very real possibility that some states will do that. And the fact that they're refusing to protect it at a federal level means that maybe you don't think it should be banned, but you don't think it's a right. Which means you don't think my daughter has a right to live. And if you voted for that, I'm not saying you personally believe that, but it wasn't a deal breaker.
Yeah.
It wasn't a deal breaker. I want to go to these fuckers with a picture of my daughter. I want to throw that picture in JD Vance's fucking face and tell me that this kid does not deserve to live. You fucking tell me that.
And there'll be people that say, like, hey, we didn't know. then know next time. It was out there. We're in an age of staggering information. It was out there. You didn't look. There are people,
And-
like mothers and wives are going to bleed out waiting for abortion care or health
They
care.
already are.
Already happening, and it will only continue. To Nathan's point, there are children right now that are, starting to become teenagers. There are trans kids who are growing up and will grow up in the next 4 years who will not make it to the end of the Trump presidency because of the Trump presidency. There are families who will go without food and saying, I didn't know, or I didn't believe it. How is that going to help them? How is that better to them? How is that going to save a pregnant person's life or a trans person's life or fill a child's belly any more than someone who is at a Trump rally screaming about how great he is? That's the thing. It's not on when you're in the booth, when you're filling out your ballot, it is not about what message you want to send. It is about the effect you will have. And the fact of the matter is that the effect is the same.
And look, it's looking like the Republicans have already taken the Senate. It's looking like they're going to take the House, which means the Affordable Care Act, there's a very real possibility it will get repealed. And that means millions of people will lose health care. Millions of people will lose that subsidy that they rely on in order to have health care. Trump says that he's for keeping the whole thing about pre-existing conditions, and I hope to God that that's true. I hope to God that if they do repeal the Affordable Care Act, that they at least keep that in there. I hope to God that that is true. But the fact of the matter is, they will very likely repeal it.
Yeah.
Because of this.
Yeah.
They will be able to do that through budget reconciliation. They barely managed to not, they didn't do that by one vote last time around.
Yeah.
All right. That is a very real possibility. Millions of people will lose health care, which means that thousands will probably die.
Yeah.
Maybe more than that. All right.
Yeah.
And look, I have been struggling financially because of inflation. I have. All right. I am supporting a family of 3 with just one salary. And the thing is, we're in a situation that is all too familiar in America, where we need childcare, we need daycare, because she's not old enough for public school yet. We need daycare, but it's hard to afford daycare without a second income. But we can't get a second income until we have fucking daycare.
Yeah.
All right. When we finally are able to find daycare for her, which, by the way, there's waiting lists. Like, we've been on a waiting list since June. Like, half of my daughter's life, she's been on a waiting list for a daycare place. When that finally happens, we're going to have to dip into our long-term savings in order to afford it.
Yeah.
And that is not going to change under Trump.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
When asked about the cost of childcare, he went on some stupid fucking rant about, I don't even remember what he was talking, like what it was. Like about, and on top of all that, these tariffs, they are going to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the if he does implement these tariffs, these across the board tariffs, and prices rise, like, I'm already struggling financially. My family is already struggling. I don't know what's going to happen to us. Like, I truly don't.
And that's the thing. Like, he's going to make a lot of stuff worse. But one of the things that really, like, hit me on the first day, aside from just feeling so disappointed, was being so disappointed that nothing was going to get better. We had an
Yeah.
opportunity to like do stuff that was exciting and could be really helpful. And now our best case scenario, best case, is in 4 years we have like still have a government.
Yeah. I do want to give a message of hope, though, because as despondent as I have been and still am, as angry as I know that Michael is, I know that there are good people in this nation. I know that there are good people in the world. And I also know that the country's with us on the issues. When we run on the issues, the country's with us. Montana, despite overwhelmingly going to Trump, they also overwhelmingly created a constitutional right to abortion. Arizona, same thing. Constitutional right to an abortion. In a red state, in a swing state, they voted for that because they're with us on the issues. The country is with us on the issues. The results of this election is not because the country itself is right-wing. The results of this election is because the economy was not getting better fast enough, and when that happens, people don't vote for the incumbent party. That's just what happens. That's just how it works. This was always going to be an uphill battle. Whether it was Biden or whether it was Harris, it was always going to be an uphill battle, and it was never going to be guaranteed. But here's the other thing that I want to impart to you all. There are two massive lies that we are taught about advocacy. The first lie is that advocacy begins and ends at the ballot box. And that is just not true. The other lie is that heroes are going to come to save you. And that's not true. And when I say that's not true, that's not actually a despondent message. That is a message of hope. Let me explain. One of the greatest heroes in civil rights history that a lot of people think of is Rosa Parks. And yes, she was a positively amazing woman. The narrative that we are told about Rosa Parks is that she was tired of segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. She was tired of it. And when asked to give up her seat, she refused to. And around that one decision, an entire movement was sparked. An organic movement just cropped up overnight, and eventually led to desegregation in Montgomery, Alabama, which inspired the rest of the nation to follow suit. That's the narrative that we're given. It's also bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact of the matter is, she was not the first black woman to say no. In fact, just months before her, Claudette Colvin was another black woman that said no. She didn't spark the movement. But she also said no. And in fact, multiple black women in Montgomery, Alabama were arrested after refusing to give up their seat on the bus going back to the 1940s. There were civil rights leaders that were working behind the scenes, that were preparing for a boycott. They were preparing for this. They had the infrastructure in place. They were prepping people for carpooling to make sure that the public buses knew that you need them more than they need you. So they organized carpooling. And all they needed was one spark in order to light the fire that they were already kindling. But they had already set that kindling. And these are people whose names history will never remember. When I say that there are no heroes, I don't mean that there aren't people that accomplish amazing things. What I mean is that the way that these things get pushed is not from those big names that are going to be written in the history books. It's from the people working behind the scenes, the multiple people that push the envelope just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit, and collectively creates real change. Convince 5 people. Convince 5 people to go along with something, and you have made a difference. That is how advocacy works. It's multiple small things at once that, in the aggregate, create real and meaningful change. Advocacy is always worth it. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you succeed. But even in your failures, you can push the envelope. Back during the Trump administration, there was a law that was being passed. It was called the ADA Education and Reform Act. It was a law that would have basically made it so the enforcement of the Americans with Disabilities Act was nearly impossible. All right? And I was terrified that this was going to pass. So you know what I did? I called my congresswoman every fucking week. I told everybody I knew, call your congresswoman, call this person every fucking week. And as a result, my congresswoman, who was a Republican, was one of 13 Republicans in the House of Representatives to vote against it. It did pass the House of Representatives, but it failed in the Senate. It failed in the Senate because people, everyday people on grassroots levels, were organizing to push the envelope as much as possible, to push that message as much as possible, to the point where, despite the fact that we lost the battle in the House, we won in the end. So this is a defeat. This is a horrific defeat. But the war is not over. Because activism always persists. Activism will always persist. And we will have a lot more defeats in the coming years. But we can find ways in order to help push that envelope back to where it needs to be. By calling representatives over and over again, every single time they try to pass some horrific bullshit, we make it clear that we're not okay with it. We make that clear. We make sure everybody knows. And even if the things do pass, we make so much noise that those around us hear it. Which means the next time there's an election, we make sure that we vote these fuckers out. Because we stood up for it. So if you are despondent, if you are upset, that is okay. Feel those feelings today. And tomorrow, fight like hell to make sure that this son of a bitch doesn't destroy our country. And if you are one of the many people whose lives are going to be impacted by this, if you are queer, you are an immigrant, you are a person of color, know that you will never be alone in the fight. That there are people that are a part of your community, or people that are allies for your community, people that care about these communities. And to that end, I want to make an admission. The right wants queer people back in the closet. You know, that's why there has been this massive backlash against queer rights all throughout the country. And whether he admits it or not, Donald Trump is going to contribute to that. He is going, as president, he is going to push, he's going to put people in positions of power that are going to roll that back because they want you afraid. They want you to stay in the closet. I have never said this publicly on the podcast. I am bisexual. I'm a bisexual man. And I have been terrified about being public about that because I know that there are people that I love that I don't know how they're going to react to that. But you know what? I don't care anymore. Because you can either love me or not love me. But I'm not going to be fake about it anymore. I will not hide that anymore. And I am not going to let Trump scare me into hiding that piece of myself.